In this episode of Motive Garage, we change intercoolers on our GR Yaris in the quest to make more power and go quicker. If you've been watching our GR Yaris build series, you'll know that things have spiraled out of control. Now that's both good and bad. The good part is, obviously, we ended up being the world's quickest GR Yaris, and we've had some pretty good times and made a lot of power and been at the forefront of tuning and development of this platform. The bad thing is, though, is some of the parts we put in initially weren't designed for the power that we've ended up at. The clutch was the first example of that, and another one is the intercooler. Now, speaking with Plasmaman, their initial design for their intercooler kit was a complete replacement for factory in the factory position that was good for sort of, 300 kilowatts at the front hubs, maybe a little bit more, but they did tell us it would start to lose its efficiency after that point and potentially look at another option. Obviously, we pushed to 350 kilowatts at the hubs, and we thought we would try a different intercooler on our GR Yaris to see if we'd get improved results. Now, basically, the problem that we were having with the Plasmaman intercooler is because it's so thick, if you can imagine, as the air hits the front of it, not all of the air, I guess, is doing its job by the time it gets to the back. It's already heated up, and there's not as good an airflow in the back half. So I guess the back half of the core isn't getting cooled down as much as the front half of the core. Now, what we did find with the Plasmaman intercooler kit is when we were doing circuit laps, there was no issues. There was constant airflow through the intercooler. You weren't always on full throttle, you were on and off, so it had the chance to recover really well. But when we go drag racing or doing dyno runs, we found that if it got heat soaked while idling or while just driving at slow speed, it would take a while to recover because the air wasn't getting to the back of the intercooler. Like I said, perfect for the application they designed it for, but what we're doing, we wanted to try something else. Essentially what I wanted is an intercooler, instead of being really thick, was really tall, so it had a massive surface area, so it would cool down and recover a lot easier. So the intercooler kit that we've chosen is the Process West intercooler kit. Now, this kit is designed to also be a bolt-on kit for a factory GR Yaris. It's a lot taller, so you have to move the bash bar forward to fit. It comes with the adapters that you need to go to factory piping. However, we're going to need grub to modify those to go with our larger Golby's Parts 2-inch piping kit. But looking at the kit overall, very high quality, and it looks awesome inside the front bar in the pictures we've seen so far. So off to impossible fabrication so grub can fit up our Process West intercooler. Let's go.
So on the journey to building a 10-second Yaris that you can win thanks to LMCT Plus, link in the description, we're starting to max out some of the components we've already fitted to the Yaris. One of this is the intercooler.
Looking at the Process West and the Plasmaman intercooler on the bench, it's very easy to see just how different they are. However, there is some interesting things to look at. The Plasmaman one is 600 by 150 by 140 thick, and the Process West is 550 by 390 by 65 thick, so quite thin. Now, if you look at the volume of each core, they're actually very similar. The Plasmaman one is 12,600 cubic centimeters, while the Process West intercooler is 12,870 cubic centimeters. The actual volume itself is almost exactly the same. So if there isn't really any more air to fill up, it means one shouldn't lose any response or drivability. Now, where they do differ a lot is the surface area. 900 centimeters for the Plasmaman item, but if you look at the Process West, it's 2,145 centimeters, more than double the surface area on the front. Now, even if you factor in the height of the bash bar and take that distance out, it still has 1,500 cubic centimeters. So it's nearly double the surface area is going to be hit by incoming air. So what does that all mean for what we're trying to do with the GR Yaris? Well, because we have to sit and idle before we go drag racing, we're going to get a lot of heat soak. So we want to be able to recover that temperature as quickly as possible. So by having more surface area, we're having more air do its job to cool the air down in the intercooler. And by being thinner, we're not going to have air at the back of the intercooler that doesn't get cool air to cool it down. So in theory, overall, we should have cooler intake air temps when we're drag racing and when we're dyno tuning the car. Another good thing about being thin is obviously more air will make it through the intercooler and to the radiator. But when you look at the Plasmaman one, it was quite short in height, so the radiator got a lot of fresh air through the center grill. So I guess it's probably much of a muchness in terms of cooling when we're circuit racing. But our priority right now is drag racing. Now, the other thing we're going to do for now is remove the oil cooler. The kit that Grub did obviously sat in the center grill, but it doesn't fit with the intercooler. So we won't be putting the oil cooler back in right now, but we are going to put it back in before we go circuit racing. Right now, our concern is the horsepower and going drag racing and being the first into the 10. So it'll save us a little bit of weight. Obviously the car will get warmer, but for drag runs, that's not a big deal. So the oil cooler will be going back in later. So let's finish getting this intercooler in the car so we can get it over to the dyno at Power Tune.
Just finished dyno testing the car with the new Process West intercooler on it. So we formed on a bit of a hypothesis as to what might happen today, and that's proven to be true. What we've found is that with the Process West cooler having a much larger frontal surface area and much thinner core, the core doesn't heat soak as much when the car's stationary. So on recovery, basically what we're talking about there is that after a run, the intercooler might be, let's say for example, at 50 degrees. Now before we start our next run, we want that to be much lower. We want it to be maybe around 40 or even 30 degrees, depending on what we're able to actually achieve. With the Plasmaman core, it took much longer to actually get to that point and actually required some assistance. And some of the time that means spraying a bit of water, adding some fans and stuff like that. Whereas with the Processed West core, that was able to just basically come back down to temperature once we'd had some airflow through the core and across it as well. So with the Plasmaman core, basically we were able to get the temperature before the run down to about 45 degrees. Now that required, like I mentioned, some water, additional time with the fan on, all those types of things. Whereas 38 degrees was our starting point with the Process West core. And that temperature was much quicker for us to actually reach that, and we didn't require the additional water and fan and things like that. With the Process West core, we were able to reach temperatures of around about 34 degrees during the center of the run, and then returning back up to the starting point, or very, very close to our starting temperature. With the Plasmaman core, we got down to about 38 degrees and then back up to its starting temperature. Now what that means is that effectively across the entire run, there was about a 5-degree difference. So that's not saying that the Plasmaman core doesn't work or isn't good, because at the end of the day, if you actually look at the amount that the actual temperature changes or the delta across a run, you'll find that they're pretty much the same. It's just that the heat soak is actually what affects the Plasmaman core much more than the Process West one. With our priority being drag racing for this car at the moment, this core is much more suited to what we're doing with the car, or the application that we're using it for. So whilst we can do a run down the track in hopefully 10 seconds, we can come back, line back up, and not actually have the effects of that heat soak affect the overall performance of the car between runs, and not have to wait multiple sessions for the car to actually cool down enough for us to say, yeah, cool, the inlet air temperatures are right for us to go again. One of the little bonuses that we got from making this change of intercooler was a decrease in pressure drop across the core. So from the data that we have from the old runs with the old intercooler and the old standard turbocharger, we found that we had around about 3.5 pound pressure drop across the intercooler core. We've run the car up today and it's made 260 kilowatts, and we've found that we've only got a pressure drop of around 1.5 pounds. So that's a pretty big difference at a very similar power level. So if we're going to extrapolate the results, it's a little bit tricky because we don't have data at the same power level with the old intercooler, so we didn't measure the pre and post pressure drop. If we look at the Plasma Man core, we were seeing 3 pound drop at around 220 kilowatts. We're seeing 3 pound drop at 360 kilowatts on the Process West. So that's how we can actually compare the pressure drop. One of the other little benefits that we got was our increase in power. Now, that was obtained from two different things. So the decrease in pressure drop across the core, that assisted us to make around maybe 6 kilowatts extra. And the little bit better efficiency and the air that we're able to get into the car today, we're able to put 1 more degree of timing in. So that's how we ended up with our magical number of 362 kilowatts. So the reason that the jump's quite small for the change that we've made is because the turbo's pretty much tapped in this situation. So we are pretty much at the absolute limit of it. So every gain that we actually get now is quite small. If we were right in the sweet spot of the efficiency of the turbo, you'd find that these small changes would actually net you much larger power increases. So this intercooler that we've now tested, it's pretty impressive. So as you've seen, we've got a much lower overall temperature, less heat soak when the car's static, and that really suits what we're using the car for.